There's a lady who goes by the name of Bernice McCarthy, who's a brilliant individual because she created what's known as the format learning system. Now, the format learning system is a system that she created to help people to be able to create the optimal learning environment. And also it helps with creating the optimal environment for great communication to occur. Now, I'd love to share with you how the format learning system connects with the vocal archetypes. If you look over here, you'll notice that I've got all the archetypes here. And this is kind of the sequence that I use to teach you about the vocal archetypes. You know, we started with motivator, educator, coach, and then friend. And I didn't teach you that sequence by accident. I taught you that sequence simply because it coincides with the sequence of what Bernice McCarthy believes creates the optimal environment for great communication to occur. Now, when you look at motivator, you know the goal of motivator is to inspire. But when do we use motivator? We use motivator when we want to talk about the why. That's for motivator. So when you're talking about the why, that's when you use motivator. And often this is how we should start our communications. We should start with the why. A lot of people don't start with the why. A lot of people start with the what. And the reason people start with the what is because people get really nervous. You know, before a presentation, you feel really nervous. And what happens when you get nervous? You want to use a shield. And guess what shield you end up using? A content shield. That's what people tend to use. Oh, because I feel nervous, I feel insecure, I feel a bit anxious, I'm going to let people know that I know what I'm talking about. Let's start with the content. Let's start with the content because it'll make me feel confident. But people don't realize that's not effective. Because if you start with content, it may not be relevant to people. You haven't shown them how it's relevant to them. That means they may not listen. Now, when do we talk about the what? Which archetype do we use? I think it's pretty straightforward, right? We use educator. So that's when we talk about the what. You've got to keep this in mind that, again, people tend to start with the what and they're afraid to start with the why. However, you've got to start with the why. Starting with the what is kind of like, you know, that analogy, that age-old analogy where people say, oh, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That's kind of like you can give people content, but you can't make them absorb it. So the reason you start with motivator and the why is, metaphorically, with that same metaphor, you've got to make the horse thirsty first. You've got to get people excited about the content first and understand why it's relevant to them. Because once they understand why it's relevant, they will then absorb it. Otherwise, they don't care about the what until they understand the why. Next, what about coach? When do we use coach? You use coach when you're talking about the how. Remember, coach is about guiding and instructing. So once you talk about the why, now they're very excited to learn about the content. Then you give them the content. Now they have the content. Now you teach them how to apply the content. And you tend to use coach. A lot of people are afraid to go into coach because they go, oh, it feels a bit aggressive. No, it's not aggressive. It's necessary. To be an effective teacher, to be an effective leader, we don't only teach, but we also have to coach. It's what I realize with my students, is that in my classes, when I get to teach them in person, I have to push my students out of their comfort zone. Leadership is not just about teaching, it's about guiding and coaching as well. And sometimes we have to give people that extra push. And I can't push them in educator. Imagine I was trying to push them in educator and I said, look, I really need you to do this. I really need you to push your volume. Notice how it's not as effective. Whereas if I say to them, look, you understand the foundations to volume now. I need you to push. This opportunity is only going to be present for you now. I need you to push. All of a sudden, when I go into coach, it's more influential and it allows me to push them and nudge them. So remember, coach is the how, and don't be afraid of it. A lot of people are afraid of it. Don't be afraid of it. It allows you to be an effective communicator, but also an effective leader. And then friend. What's friend for? And again, friend for me, it's the same as the archetypes. It's for you to connect. It's connection. So I've remixed the formula a little bit because Bernice McCarthy believes we've got to start with the why, then go into the what, and then go into the how. Now, to me, I believe in ending the communication with connection, but I also believe in starting the communication with connection. I believe starting with connection and ending with connection. And I'll tell you why I believe this. I believe this simply for this reason. I believe that unless people know that you care, they're not going to connect with your content. You've got to connect with them first before they'll actually listen to what you have to say. This is why I often say, imagine we started a call online. Let's just say that we started a virtual call. And if I started the virtual call and I started with the what immediately, imagine we're on a virtual call together. Just imagine. Hi everyone, it's really good to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's go through the agenda of what we're going to speak about today on the call. First, we're going to talk about how I didn't mention the why and now you're disengaged and you don't know why this content is relevant to you. And then after that, I'll go into, I'm trying to give you water as a horse and, you're not even thirsty and I didn't make you thirsty because I didn't talk about the why. And then let's talk about how the fact that I'm sticking to this particular archetype is causing you to disengage and you're trying really hard, but poor you can't engage because I'm stuck in the educator archetype. And I'm using a content shield because inside I'm really insecure and I feel concerned that you will think I'm not smart, hence I need to give you the content shield. Can you see how that is just not engaging? Engagement, first of all, to me means that you've got to connect with the person, create a connection. Now that they care and they know that you care, now talk about the why. Make sure it's relevant. Make sure they understand why this is relevant to them. Then after that, then give them the what. Only then do you give them the what. And I'll tell you, if this is the first time you're learning about the format learning system, it takes a lot of courage to connect with people first, then talk about the why, then go into the content. A lot of people who, again, haven't done this before, usually this scares them. And they want to get straight to the point. And the only reason why you think to yourself, I have to get straight to the point, is because you don't know how to connect well and talk to the why well. And what can help you connect well is by learning how to use the friend archetype more effectively. What can help you deliver the why better is engage and motivator. The reason that you might think that, this might take too long to connect with people, then talk about the why, then get to the what. My manager and my boss wants me to get straight to the point. But the reason you think this is simply because you've seen this done poorly. Often what happens is people are talking about the why and then they may get stuck in a blank archetype. And then they're just talking, remember, with a blank face and then no emotion. And even if you talk about the why that was really good here, no one's going to engage. You've got to really engage with the motivator archetype and ensure that you don't get stuck in a blank archetype, for example. Or worse, get stuck in an educator archetype, but get stuck in the educator archetype for the entire conversation. Remember, I will never talk bad about any of these archetypes. They're only bad and ineffective if you get stuck in that archetype. You can see with my presentations, when people engage me for a keynote experience, I always make sure I start with the friend archetype. I connect with the audience first, whether it's in person or virtual. And just like in my keynote that you watched earlier on in the course, in that keynote, I was speaking to a room full of thousands of people. And guess which vocal archetype I used to start that keynote? Friend archetype. I used friend. I connected with them first before I talked about the why and then got to the content gradually. Now I hope you can see that when you take vocal archetypes and you connect it with Bernice McCarthy's format learning system, you just enhance this entire process for the audience and all those you communicate with.